The courtroom was filled to capacity, every gaze fixed on me as I faced the man I once called my husband. Brandon looked confident, almost smug, lounging back in his chair as if he owned the place. His tailored suit was immaculate, his hair slicked back the way he always styled it when he wanted to impress. But I knew better now. I knew what hid behind that polished smile. "Your Honor," Brandon's lawyer began, his voice echoing through the silent room. "My client has been a supportive husband throughout this marriage and deserves his fair share of the assets they built together." I almost laughed. Built together? Brandon had never contributed to my company. While I worked 18-hour days, coding until my eyes blurred and fighting to convince investors of my vision, he spent his time networking at fancy restaurants and golf courses. Or so he said. Brandon stood, a familiar gleam in his eyes, the one he always had before launching into one of his exaggerated stories meant to impress strangers. Straightening his tie, he cleared his throat dramatically. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, feigning humility. "I know this has been hard for both of us, but I think it's only fair that I receive what I'm entitled to. After all, I supported Elena during the early days of her little app business. My company was worth $12 million, yet Brandon always found ways to belittle my success. The judge, a composed woman with sharp eyes and silver hair, gestured for him to continue. I gripped the envelope in my lap tighter, the edges of the documents pressing into my palm. Not yet, I thought. Let him keep talking. "The truth is," Brandon said, voice growing louder, "I've been patient long enough. I've watched Elena hoard her money while I struggled to make ends meet. But that ends today." He turned dramatically toward the audience, spreading his arms like a performer. "After today, I'll finally get to live off her fortune, just like I deserve." Gasps and laughter rippled through the courtroom. Someone behind me whispered, "What a piece of work." Even his lawyer looked horrified, tugging at Brandon's sleeve to make him sit down. But Brandon was too caught up in the moment, enjoying the attention. "That's right," he shouted, pointing at me. "She owes me everything. I tolerated her workaholic lifestyle, her endless meetings, her obsession with money. I deserve to be compensated for my suffering." The courtroom erupted again, some people laughing openly. Even the court reporter paused to look up, eyebrows raised. I stayed calm, holding the envelope that contained the truth. Judge Wong slammed her gavel. "Order, Mr. Cole, sit down immediately." Brandon ignored her, glowing with self-satisfaction. "Your Honor, I'm simply being honest. This marriage was a business deal, and it's time for me to collect." Her tone turned icy. "Mr. Cole, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt." He finally sat, still smirking, convinced his little speech had worked. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. I rose slowly, my heartbeat steadying. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench?" Judge Wong looked mildly surprised, but nodded. "You may." As I walked forward, I could feel Brandon's eyes on me, hear his frantic whispers to his lawyer. Reaching the bench, I held out the envelope. "Your Honor," I said quietly, "please check the date on his signature, the one on the prenuptial agreement he swears he never signed." The judge opened the envelope, scanning the documents. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she looked up at me, a hint of admiration in her expression, before glancing back at the papers and then at Brandon. Her shoulders began to shake. A small chuckle escaped, then another, until she was laughing so hard she had to cover her mouth. Behind me, I heard Brandon's chair scrape sharply against the floor. When I turned, his face was pale. 3 years earlier, I never imagined I'd be here, defending what was rightfully mine. Back then, life was good. My app company had just landed its biggest client, and I was finally seeing the rewards of 5 relentless years, long nights, rejected pitches, and countless sacrifices. The charity gala that night was supposed to be a celebration. My friend Natasha had dragged me there, insisting I needed to socialize for once. Standing near the champagne table in my one decent dress, I felt out of place among the wealthy donors and polished elites. That's when I saw him. Brandon stood near the auction display, laughing easily with a group of men. He had that magnetic charm that drew people in effortlessly. His suit looked expensive, his smile disarming. When our eyes met, I felt butterflies for the first time in years. He approached with the confidence of someone unaccustomed to rejection. "You look like someone who'd rather be anywhere else," he said, voice smooth and teasing. I laughed despite myself. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who feels the same," he replied, offering his hand. "Brandon Cole," he introduced himself with an easy smile. "And you're the brilliant woman behind TechFlow Solutions, right? I've been reading about your company in business journals." His words caught me off guard. Usually, people at these events either didn't know what I did or lost interest the moment I mentioned app development. But Brandon seemed genuinely curious. As I told him about my latest project, he listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that proved he understood what I was saying. "You know what's impressive?" he said as we moved to a quieter corner of the ballroom. "Most people here inherited their money or married into it. You built something from nothing. That takes courage." I felt my face warm. Compliments weren't something I was used to, especially from someone who looked like he belonged on a magazine cover. We talked for hours about work, travel, and our shared love for old films. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Our first date was perfect. Brandon took me to a rooftop restaurant I'd never heard of, where the city lights glittered beneath us. He told me about his real estate business and how he specialized in luxury properties. He seemed confident and ambitious, qualities I admired. When he talked about his career, his eyes sparkled the same way mine did when I spoke about coding. "I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone like you," he said over dessert. "Someone who understands what it means to chase a dream." Our relationship moved quickly, maybe too quickly, but I was swept up in it. Brandon sent flowers to my office every Friday, planned surprise weekend trips, and always listened when I vented about work. For the first time, I felt I had a true partner. 6 months later, he proposed on that same rooftop. The ring was vintage and beautiful. He said it reminded him of my classic beauty. I said yes immediately. The wedding was everything I'd imagined, but never thought I'd have time for. Brandon handled nearly all the planning, insisting I focus on my company while he took care of the rest. He always seemed to know exactly what I wanted. The ceremony was simple yet elegant, attended by close friends and family. On our honeymoon in Italy, Brandon was the perfect husband, taking photos of me at every landmark, learning bits of Italian, and never complaining when I took work calls. He proudly introduced me as my brilliant wife, the tech entrepreneur. Looking back, I now see the signs I ignored. He often steered conversations toward my company finances, casually asked about client contracts and investments, and sometimes I'd catch him on my laptop late at night. I convinced myself it was harmless curiosity. I wanted to believe his interest came from love, not calculation. I was so grateful to have someone who accepted my ambition that I overlooked the warning signs. If only I'd realized then that Brandon's fascination with my work wasn't admiration, it was investigation. The first crack in our perfect marriage appeared 6 months after our honeymoon. I came home early one day and found Brandon pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. "I told you I need more time," he said, sounding strained. "The money will be there. Just one more week." When he noticed me standing in the doorway, he quickly ended the call and smiled, trying to mask his tension. "Hey, beautiful, you're home early." "Who was that?" I asked. "Just a difficult client." He replied, avoiding eye contact. "You know how real estate is. People get impatient when deals take too long." I wanted to believe him, so I pushed away the uneasy feeling and pretended nothing was wrong. But the strange phone calls continued. Late at night, I'd wake to find his side of the bed empty and hear his voice from the kitchen. Whenever I asked, he had an explanation. clients in other time zones, property emergencies, last-minute negotiations. Then the bills started arriving. While searching for insurance papers, I found a credit card statement under his name, with a $37,000 balance. My hands trembled as I scanned the charges: cash advances from casinos, gambling sites, and betting platforms I'd never heard of. That evening, I confronted him. Brandon broke down instantly, tears streaming as he buried his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Elena," he sobbed. "It got out of control. It started as harmless fun, just a few bets to unwind after stressful days." I felt my stomach drop. $37,000 isn't fun, Brandon. "I know, but I can fix this," he pleaded. "I have big deals coming up. Once they close, I'll pay it all off. I just need some help to get through this rough patch." His voice softened, his expression desperate, the same look that had once melted my resolve. I almost gave in. Almost. "How much do you owe in total?" I asked quietly. His silence said everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "About 200,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. $200,000. That was more money than most people earned in 5 years, and my husband had gambled it away without a word. "I can't access that kind of money without affecting my business," I said, keeping my tone steady. "And even if I could, how do I know you won't lose it again?" For a split second, I saw something dark flicker across Brandon's face, his charm slipping just long enough to reveal anger. "Your business," he snapped. "It's always about your precious business. What about your husband? What about our marriage?" "Our marriage?" I stood up, my own frustration rising. "You lied to me for months, gambling money we don't have, while I've been working non-stop to build our future." He gave a bitter laugh. "Our future? Let's be honest. This has always been about your future, your company, your money. I'm just the accessory you show off at business events." His words stung. "That's not true, and you know it," I said. But he stepped closer, voice hardening. "When was the last time you even asked about my work? When was the last time you cared about what I do?" I opened my mouth but couldn't answer. Deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been so consumed by my company that I'd lost sight of what was happening at home. "I'm trying to build something for us," I said quietly. "No, you're building it for yourself," he shot back. "And now that I need help, you treat me like a stranger asking for charity." The argument dragged on for hours, his anger turning into tears, then back into accusations that I didn't love him anymore. By the time we went to bed, nothing was resolved. That night, as he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The man I'd married was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. I didn't know it then, but this was only the beginning. The breaking point came 8 months later, on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my home office when I heard Brandon rummaging through the filing cabinet in our bedroom. That wasn't unusual. We kept all our important documents there, but something about his urgency made me pause. Quietly, I walked to the doorway and watched as he flipped through folders with nervous intensity. When he finally stopped, his shoulders relaxed. In his hand was our marriage certificate and several business documents I had filed months ago. "What are you doing?" I asked. He spun around, startled. "Just looking for tax papers. My accountant needs them." But I could see he wasn't holding tax files. In his hands were my company's incorporation records, partnership agreements, and financial statements, documents that had nothing to do with taxes. "Those aren't tax documents, Brandon." His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to organize our finances. Is that a problem?" "Our finances?" I said. "These are my business records. We're married, Elena. What's yours is mine, remember?" The way he said it sent a chill through me. His voice was cold, calculated. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Something wasn't right, and I needed to know what he was planning. What I learned left me numb. He's been making inquiries, my lawyer, Patricia, explained over the phone. Questions about community property laws, business asset division, and spousal rights. Elena, it sounds like your husband might be preparing for something. Preparing for what? I asked, though I already feared the answer. A divorce, she said. One where he claims a share of your assets. I felt sick. But he's the one with gambling debts. He's the one who's been lying. That won't matter, Patricia warned. If he's positioned himself legally as a partner in your business, he could make a claim. And from what I'm seeing, he's been very deliberate. That evening, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I filed for divorce. 3 days later, Brandon was served. His reaction stunned me. Instead of anger or disbelief, he smiled. Well, well, he said, tossing the papers onto the counter like junk mail. I was wondering when you'd finally grow a backbone. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. He crossed his arms, looking completely at ease. It means the game has finally begun, Elena. And you have no idea what you've just stepped into. Game? Our marriage was a game to you? Our marriage was a business transaction, he said evenly. I provided charm and companionship. You provided financial stability. Now that the deal's ending, it's time to settle accounts. I stared at him, searching for the man I once loved. I don't even know who you are anymore. Sure you do, he said. I'm the man who's about to own half of everything you've built. He waved the divorce papers with a smirk. While you were busy being the genius entrepreneur, I was playing the long game. What are you talking about? I demanded. Brandon opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Remember when we got married? All those documents you signed without reading because you trusted me. Let me refresh your memory. He spread the papers across the kitchen table. Marriage certificates, property forms, partnership agreements. My signature was on every page, yet something felt off. I never agreed to make you a business partner, I said, scanning one of the documents. Oh, but you did, he replied, tapping a paragraph buried deep within the fine print. Right here, it states that any business assets acquired during our marriage are considered joint property. I read the paperwork more closely, my chest tightening with each line. If those documents were valid, Brandon would be entitled to half of everything I'd built. I never would have signed this, I whispered. But you did. Your signature is right here, dated 6 months after our wedding. I have witnesses. Brandon's smile went cold. Am I lying? We'll let the court decide. While you were the trusting wife, I was protecting my interests. He gathered the papers and warned me to get a good lawyer, then casually added that he'd already filed preliminary claims on several of my assets, so nothing disappears before the divorce. He left, and I was left staring at the reality that my marriage had been constructed on deception. The next morning, I sat in Detective Carlos Rivera's office, hands shaking as I explained. The station smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights made everything feel harsher. Mrs. Cole, Rivera said, leaning forward, what you describe sounds like fraud. Walk me through when you first suspected document manipulation. I told him I'd never sign anything that would hand him rights to my business. I read every legal paper carefully and always had my lawyer review contracts. Rivera listened, took notes, and asked for copies of everything Brandon had shown me. He said he'd bring in someone who could test the document's authenticity. That's how I met Natasha Brooks, a forensic document analyst at the State Crime Lab. Younger than I expected, with sharp green eyes and an intensity that reminded me of myself, Natasha began by establishing a timeline and checking evidence of authenticity. She spread the papers out, used a magnifying glass, and asked for genuine samples of my signature from the period in question. I showed her photos I keep of important contracts. Comparing them, she noted the basic structure matched, but there were subtle differences in pressure and stroke, possible tracing or copying, and she needed more tests. While Natasha examined the documents, Detective Rivera shared his preliminary findings. Brandon had a pattern. 2 prior marriages to successful businesswomen, both ending in messy divorces where he claimed assets. In one case, he'd settled. In the other, the ex fought back but suspected forgery. Rivera had contacted her, Jennifer, and she agreed to help. I met Jennifer that afternoon, an architect my age with exhausted eyes and a folder full of bank records, witness statements, and suspected forged documents. She explained how Brandon studies targets, finds vulnerabilities, and exploits them, often preparing his exit long before the marriage. She'd been collecting evidence for years and was waiting for the moment to prove his pattern. Driving home that evening, for the first time in months, I felt a cautious hope. He'd been clever, but he'd made a critical mistake. He had underestimated me. 2 weeks later, Natasha called with news that changed everything. "Elena, you need to come to the lab right away," she said, her voice full of urgency. "I found something that could blow this case wide open." I rushed there immediately, heart racing. Natasha greeted me with a confident smile and motioned toward a microscope on her desk. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one of the documents Brandon had presented. "This signature, supposedly yours from 18 months ago." I peered through the lens and saw my enlarged signature. It looked normal, but Natasha's excitement said otherwise. "Now look at this," she continued, switching slides. Under magnification, I could see small fibers embedded in the ink. These fibers come from a Pilot G2 gel pen, model number 31256. That specific pen wasn't released until 6 months ago. Yet this document claims to be from 18 months ago. The realization hit instantly. He had backdated the documents. "Exactly," Natasha confirmed. "He created these recently and disguised them as older papers. He likely assumed no one would test the ink." Relief and anger flooded through me. "So this proves he forged my signature." "It proves even more," she said. "It shows deliberate planning and preparation." Detective Rivera arrived as Natasha explained the findings. His expression brightened. "This is what we needed," he said. "But we must be cautious. If Brandon suspects we know, he could destroy evidence or run." "What do you suggest?" I asked. "We let him think he's winning," Rivera replied. "Let him walk into court confident. Then we expose the truth." The following days were exhausting. I had to act unaware while Brandon walked around smugly, certain victory was his. He'd moved into the guest room to focus on his legal strategy, but spent hours on the phone, likely coordinating with his lawyer. One morning at breakfast, he said casually, "You know, Elena, this doesn't have to get ugly. If you're reasonable about the assets, we can end this quickly." I asked what reasonable meant. "A 50-50 split, the house. Your business, the investments. It's fair since I supported you emotionally." I held back my anger. "I'll think about it," I replied. "Good," he said, "because judges don't appreciate hidden assets." That evening, Rivera called with an update. "We've tracked his calls. He's been contacting a specialist in fake documents, someone he's likely used before." "Can you arrest him?" I asked. "Not yet. We need him to present the forgeries in court, so intent is undeniable." Later that night, Jennifer visited to help prepare for the hearing. She brought more records proving Brandon's pattern of deception. "He always gets overconfident right before a hearing," she warned. "He'll probably make a speech about how he deserves your success. That's when his ego exposes him." We reviewed the plan. I'd let him present first, then reveal Natasha's findings at the right moment. "Are you ready?" she asked as she left. I thought about everything: his deceit, the manipulation, the months of self-doubt he caused, and the women before me. "I'm ready," I said. The hearing was scheduled for the next morning. I barely slept, not from fear, but anticipation. At dawn, I dressed carefully in a navy suit, the one I wore to important meetings when I needed to project strength. Staring in the mirror, I realized how much I'd changed since the charity gala where we met. The trusting woman I once was no longer existed. Brandon had already left when I came downstairs, likely to review his strategy with his lawyer. I wondered if he felt any nerves or still believed he couldn't lose. At the courthouse, I met Detective Rivera and my lawyer. Rivera handed me the envelope containing Natasha's analysis. Let him present first. When Brandon entered the courtroom with his lawyer, he looked every bit the confident businessman in his tailored suit. He caught my eye and actually winked, as if this entire ordeal were a game. Judge Wong called the session to order, and Brandon's lawyer began outlining how his client supposedly deserved half of our marital assets. I listened in disbelief as they portrayed him as a supportive husband who had sacrificed his own ambitions to help build my company. Then Brandon took the stand. "Your Honor," he began with dramatic flair, "I want to be honest about what our marriage really was." His lawyer subtly tried to stop him, but Brandon was in full performance mode. "I've been patient," he continued, "patient while my wife built her empire, working 18-hour days and ignoring me. Patient while she treated me like an employee, not a partner." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Just as Jennifer had predicted, he was doing all the damage himself. "But I wasn't idle," he went on proudly. "I was protecting my interests. I have signed agreements proving I'm entitled to half of everything we built." Ignoring his lawyer's discomfort, Brandon held up the forged documents. "These prove she agreed to share her business with me. She signed them willingly." Judge Wong studied the papers silently. Brandon, now completely absorbed in his performance, added, "It's time the court knew what I endured, living with a workaholic who valued money over her husband. Well, no more. After today, I'll finally get what I deserve." The courtroom reacted with gasps and uneasy laughter. Even the court reporter glanced up in disbelief. Brandon's lawyer tugged at his sleeve, but he kept talking. "That's right," he said, raising his voice. "I endured endless meetings, financial stress, and no appreciation. I deserve compensation." Judge Wong struck her gavel sharply. "Mr. Cole, return to your seat immediately." But he kept going, declaring that the marriage had been a business transaction and that it was time to collect payment. "Sit down now, or I'll hold you in contempt," the judge warned. Brandon finally obeyed, still smirking, convinced he'd won. That's when I stood. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench?" Judge Wong nodded. I walked forward, handed her an envelope, and said evenly, "Please check the date on his signature from the prenuptial agreement, and more importantly, review the ink analysis of the documents he just presented." The judge opened the envelope and read Natasha's report, her eyebrows lifting higher with each page. "Those papers," I continued, "were signed using a pen that wasn't manufactured until 6 months ago. Mr. Cole forged my signature and backdated documents to take my assets." Judge Wong examined the report again, then glanced at Brandon. Her shoulders began to shake. Then she started laughing quietly, trying to compose herself. Behind me, Brandon's chair scraped the floor. His face had gone pale. "Mr. Cole," the judge said firmly, "you are under arrest for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. Bailiff, take him into custody." As the officer cuffed him, Brandon glared at me. "You think you're so smart," he hissed. "No," I replied calmly. "I just learned not to trust people who seem too perfect." Applause filled the courtroom as he was led away. Detective Rivera was already on the phone, coordinating with other jurisdictions to reopen his past cases. Judge Wong dismissed all of Brandon's claims and awarded me full control of my assets, along with damages for emotional distress and legal costs. Outside the courthouse, Jennifer was waiting. "We did it," she said, hugging me tightly. "We finally stopped him." 6 months later, Brandon was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and forgery. The investigation uncovered that he had targeted at least 4 other women, stealing large sums through similar schemes. I rebuilt my life slowly, focusing on my business and trusting my instincts again. I learned that the most dangerous people often appear charming and flawless, but also that justice has a way of catching up, no matter how long it takes. Brandon thought he could take everything from me. In the end, the only thing he earned was a prison sentence and the knowledge that the women he'd deceived were finally free. The signature he forged to claim my fortune became the very proof that brought him down.